Hey guys, so I just realized that there was no intro for this tutorial. So this is the tutorial for the Flames character picture. This is what the finished result looks like. So I'm going to be showing you kind of like how I did this with the speed paint that I recorded for this video. And I did all of the other stuff like in the beginning of April, but I didn't do an intro back then, and I don't have time to run upstairs and do this, so this is the tutorial for the Flames Pokemon picture. The characters engulfed in flame tutorial, I think is what I'll call it. Anyway, so we're going to get right into the supplies you'll need, and then the different steps that you need to take. I can't talk very properly. Anyway, let's start the tutorial before I embarrass myself even more. Alright, first things first with this project is that you will need paper. The paper you choose should be easy to blend on because there's a lot of layering and blending with this subject. The paper I recommend for your finished piece is an acid-free cardstock. I'm personally using regular ivory colored cardstock that you can find at Staples, just because it's a good quality paper and it's actually pretty affordable. It comes in a really big ream. Another paper I would recommend is Express It blending cardstock, which is especially made for Copic and other marker artwork. I don't have any examples of that right now because I used all of mine because it's such a great paper, but this is a much more cost-friendly alternative. The blending card will definitely look a little nicer, but what I don't recommend would be really thin paper, really smooth paper, or something like sketch paper. Particularly, I would avoid these brands here, or these kinds of paper. This is Aquabee Artist Marker Pad, and this paper it says that it's good for Copics on it, but personally, I have found that it's not very good for blending. So I would only use this paper if you were using a lot of light colors in your pictures. I've doodled all over this. It's pretty old. And it's all full of really poorly drawn drawings because it's from forever ago. But anyway, this paper is really not good for blending, and that's pretty much what you're going to be doing most of in this subject, so I wouldn't recommend this paper for this project. I also wouldn't recommend this paper, my bleed-proof marker pad for Copic. This stuff is super thin, and if you erase on this, there's a good chance you're going to wrinkle it because it's so darn thin, and it doesn't look very nice when you blend on it. It gets kind of this speckly, weird look to it. But because of this particular subject, we're going to be doing a lot of erasing. And since this paper crinkles so easily, I would not recommend it for this project either. I found another paper that says good for Copics, that it's recommended for Copics. See right there how it says that? It's called professional cartooning paper. And this paper is so slick that, here I'll show you. I never use this paper because it's awful. It's like trying to color on glass or something. The color, it's like, they don't blend very well. I don't know, it just, they get really, like, juicy, I guess. They're not, I don't like this paper. It's bad. Don't use this paper. The paper is only good for, like, permanent markers. So those are the papers I recommend. Also try and avoid papers that say dry media, holding that upside down, for dry media, because typically that's for like sketching, like on pencil work, so it has a really rough surface, and Copics bleed uncontrollably sometimes with this kind of paper, so avoid that. So basically I just recommend regular cardstock. It's easy to find and it works pretty nice. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is erasers. This drawing is not going to have line art of any sort. When you're doing flames, they don't look very convincing if you put line art into your picture. So I am definitely going to be needing a lot of erasers, just because I don't want any of my pencil lines to be showing or for them to get colored over with Copics. When you color over pencil line with Copics, you can't erase it, so you really need to be diligent about making sure your sketch is light and hard to see. So the erasers I recommend are a kneaded eraser because they don't scuff up the paper really bad, and they make your pencil lines light enough to where they won't smear with the Copics. I also recommend a high polymer eraser by Pentel. You can get these at Target for a pretty good price. I think that there are other places that you can buy them at, like Walmart, but these are really great erasers. So, kneaded eraser, a high polymer eraser, whatever, and then an eraser pen. And you can get these at art stores usually. Their refills look like this, because mine's almost out, so I'm going to have to refill mine. But they're like a little ink pen. You click it, and erasers come out. Eraser stick comes out at the end. Erasers I do not recommend are ones that have color in them, because sometimes they'll leave a red or whatever color they are streak. This one doesn't, but just to be safe, I'm not going to be using it. So these are the erasers I recommend. Right, so obviously the next thing you're going to need is pencils, because you're going to need to sketch your picture. I used an HB pencil, and that's just a really hard lead, so it doesn't draw very darkly. And then I'm going to use a number 2 HB, just a regular Ticonderoga pencil. And, yeah, I don't know. These are pretty sharp. I sharpened them really fine so that I could get a lot of detail in my picture, because you're going to want to pretty much finish your sketch with the pencil. You're not going to be doing any inking, so you're going to want them to be really nice and pointy. Alright, so for the last bit, you're going to need some Copic markers, of course, since this is a Copic marker project. So what I do when I'm working on a picture is I always keep my markers that I'm going to be using in a little tote like this, and I divide them up according to what I'm going to use them for. So for instance, these are all going to be the ones that I use on the flames, and these are all the ones that I'm going to be using on the background, and these are all the ones I'm going to be using on the characters. And I have all the refills that I own for any of the markers that I picked out, just because usually the ones that I own refills for are ones that I use a lot of, and I recommend refilling your markers before you start working, of course, because it just keeps it from drying out while you're trying to color. Since this is a lot of blending involved with this project, it's a really good idea to have your refills on hand, just in case you run out of ink. So the markers I'm going to be using are Y000, Y21, Y13, Y17, YR14, YR12, R27, and the colorless blender. And those are all the ones for the flames. I'll kind of explain to you step by step what each marker is going to be used for. So right now I'm just giving you the list of colors that I'm using because I know a lot of people will ask. So for my background I'm using E13, E37, and E74. And for my characters, since they are going to be a Ninetales and a Flareon, we're going to be having some R29, some E30, and R08, and of course there's going to be some Y21 in there also for Flareon's fluff. But since we start with the flames first, I'm keeping that yellow over here. Anyway, and then I have refills like I said before. And that's pretty much all you really need for this project. So I'm going to get on with it and show you guys how I start. Okay, so first things first, you're going to need a sketch. You're going to want to have your sketch pretty light, so you're going to have to try and draw really lightly. If you do sketch with dark lines, you probably will want to trace over your original onto a new sheet of paper. You can do this with a light box, or you can hang your original picture up in the window. Make sure the window's dry. And then tape your new piece of paper over it. You're going to want to try and use removable tape like masking tape or painter's tape. And the light needs to be bright enough outside to be able to see, obviously. Either with the sun, or you could have a friend hold a flashlight for you if they're really that patient. So that would be a good way to retrace if you draw really darkly, but I have tried not to do that with this picture. So right now I'm just going to clean up my sketch.
Alright, so as I clean up my sketch, you
try
can
and
see
get rid of
using
all
that
of
kneaded
these
eraser.
lines.
Basically what you do with a kneaded eraser is you kind of stretch it a little bit to make it sticky, I guess. I don't know. And then you just kind of press it down on the paper multiple times, and it will pick up the graphite without scrubbing the fibers of the paper. And this keeps the Copics from blending too much, from bleeding all over the place. And if you don't have a kneaded eraser, they're pretty cheap. This one was like 49 cents at a craft store. So they're pretty cheap, and I would recommend that you get one. I'm also detailing up those darker areas with that eraser pen, and I actually, even though I really love my high polymer eraser, I didn't use it very much because it's better for larger areas. But anyway, that's basically what I did with the different erasers, in case you were wondering. Alright, so once your sketch is nice and clean like this one is now, you can start sketching the outline of the flames with your lightest yellow. Now here I'm using Y000, and this color is so light you really can't see it on the screen, unfortunately, but it's a great color to use for sketching with Copics, especially for fire, because it's just so light that you can only barely see it in person. If you wanted to use a darker color, you could sketch the outline of the flames with a slightly darker yellow, like Y13, and it will turn out just fine, because you're going to be blending it so much anyway that the yellow of Y13 could be completely covered up in the process of you coloring anyways. While you're working, you're going to want to erase little bits of pencil outlining, because like I have said before, and I'm going to say it again, Copics make your pencil lines permanent. So avoid coloring over pencil at all costs unless you really, I guess, are planning on having that pencil line in your final picture, because if you don't want that pencil line there, well, if you color over it with Copics, it's gonna be there unless you color over it dark enough with a dark color. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble. While you're sketching your fire, you have to remember that fire generally burns upwards. This is because the heat of fire makes it less dense than the air around it, and tongues of fire pointing towards the ground will actually make your picture look like its perspective is off. Fire naturally goes upwards, and that's why hot air balloons float. And even if the fire is being forced downwards, like from a dragon's mouth, or if you have a flamethrower in your picture, the ends of the flame are much more convincing if they curl upwards. And that's just something to keep in mind as you're drawing your outlines for your flames. And here I'm going to move on in just a little bit to the actual coloring of the flames. Alright, so once you've got your flames all sketched out with that light yellow, you can start filling them in. What I am doing here is adding Y21, and I'm just adding in the base of the flames, just the lightest part of the flames is usually the bottom. And so I'm just coloring in the base with that Y21, and then I start blending it with Y000, just to make it really easy to blend back into the character once I start coloring the character. And then after I add that color, I come back in with another color, Y17, and I just color the outermost edge of Y21 to kind of add on to the flame and make it a little bit bigger. And then I blend that color with Y21 again, and then after I'm done adding Y17, I add YR14, and this is the orange color that you see coming in, and it's just to really darken up the flame, and I don't add a whole lot of it. And once I'm done adding it, I blend it again with Y17, and then I blend that with Y21 just to make everything really nice and smooth. And you can kind of see how the flame looks a little bit see-through in the middle, and that's really what my goal was to make it kind of translucent, because fire is a little bit translucent. So that's what I do basically, and I do this for all of the flames that I add on. Some of them I don't put a lot of yellow, orange onto, just to make them all look a little bit different. And my suggestion would be to work in sections so that you're not coloring all of one color and then all of the next color and then all of the next color on all of the flames, because if you keep it in small sections, the ink will be wet and the flames will blend a lot better, and they'll look a lot more, I guess realistic is what I'm thinking of, but that's not really what I mean to say. They'll just look a little bit more soft, and they'll pop out a lot more. But that's basically how I color the flames, and I'm not going to make you sit here and watch all of these since I'm going to be posting the speed paint of this also. So we're going to move on to how I work the background in. Alright, so now that we've got these flames in here, it's time to go on to the next step, which is coloring in the background. Personally, I like to do the background before I do the characters, but once you've got the flames in there, it's really your choice whether you want to go characters first or background first. I mean, of course, you have to do the flames before you do either one, just because it's really hard to do the flames when you're working around color that's already there. The flames are probably the most difficult part, and it's just easier if there's no color already on the paper. Now, I like to do the background first just because it makes the character shapes easier for me to see, and I know that fiddling around all of those flames looks pretty difficult, but it's not really that tough, especially if you have a marker with a nice pointy nib, which I actually didn't have. I had a marker whose nib was worn down. My E13, which is the color I used for my background, has been used so much that it's dull. So I need to replace the nib on that marker. But it still turned out pretty nice, even for a marker that didn't have a very fine detailed tip to it, so it's not too hard to do this. But basically, when you're doing a picture with this much detail in the foreground, you really don't want to put a huge amount of detail in the background. So I just put in a layer of flat color, and the whole background area in my picture is E13. And the hardest part about it was basically working around the fire. So when you're working around the fire, kind of try to outline the edge of the fire with your background color and then fill in the blank areas. And this just saves a lot of work, especially if you try to color quickly. It can get kind of tough to work around all those flames. But if you're patient enough, you can do it pretty easily. So once you've got that flat color down, you can start to add some texture with a darker color. In my case, I used E37. Down there in the corners, I start adding in this color in kind of triangular, long, curving swoops. And I do this same technique in sky, and it just gives the picture some movement and some texture without taking away a lot from the foreground in terms of focus. And after I added those in, I blended them out with E13, and then I added more of those swoops in a different color. The color I used that time was E74. I keep wanting to say 47, but I don't have that color. E74, and this color is a little bit more purpley. It's almost gray, especially when compared to these other colors. And it's really great for adding in a shadow, and it makes for a nice contrast against the fire, and it makes the characters pop out really nice. So, anyway, the reason I chose brown for a background was because this is such a warm themed picture. It would be really hard to try this with a blue or a green. That's definitely something for a more advanced, I guess, person. And since this is my first time in a really long time doing fire, I wanted to make it simple. So I just picked a warm color scheme for the whole picture, and that made it a lot easier for me. So if this is your first time doing a fire picture, I would suggest picking a warm background color, just to keep it simple. Alright, so we're going to color Flareon. Basically, with Flareon you want to kind of avoid coloring over all of the flame with that bold red that he is. So what you do with Flareon is you want to color the red only to the edge of the fire, like where the bottom of the fire attaches to the character, basically, if that makes any sense. And then where the character's outline normally would be, you only add tiny little suggestions of that red color, like little tiny lines along the outline of the character. Don't completely outline the character, just add little spots of color in the fire that show where the character's outline is. And once you've got those down, you want to blend them like crazy. I used a couple different yellows. Like on his ear, I used Y21 but I also used Y13 in other areas too. And these are both really good markers to blend reds with, because reds don't blend very well with the colorless blender, especially since the flames are already yellow. Using yellow as a blender is a good idea. And then the rest of the character, you pretty much just want to color him like you normally would, avoiding the flames, of course, and for areas where the patches of fire completely overlap his body, like on his paws, you can add little patches of red color in the middle of the flame and blend those like crazy, and that will make those flames look kind of see-through, which gives it a kind of nice effect. So that's really how you color Flareon. You just try to avoid coloring the edges like you normally would, because the fire you really want to outline the character. So I hope that makes sense. It's been several takes of me recording this to get down how to color Flareon, so I hope that helps. Alright, so when I was coloring Ninetales, basically what I did was I sort of blended over all of his body with Y21, especially in his tails, and I then went over his colors or his body with E30. Now, since all of his colors that I used are lighter than the flames, I actually didn't have to do anything special to Ninetales in order to make the fire blend with him, because the light colors just kind of automatically blended with the fire anyway. So basically you just want to color Ninetales the way you normally would, and when you're all done with layering down Y21 and E30, you add in the shades, the shading, and I used E42. Now it's kind of hard to shade a character that's pretty much engulfed in flames, because obviously they're kind of like a light source, so shade sparingly, otherwise it can get kind of confusing to look at. And that's really all you need to do with Ninetales. So pretty much after this, all I did was add highlights, and I colored in Flareon's eyes, thankfully, because they look kind of creepy. And I'm sorry, I keep yawning. I'm a little bit sleepy. Pretty much after this, you're all done. And I'm sorry I couldn't do really detailed parts of the entire thing, but I really wanted this to be a little bit more condensed. So thank you for watching the tutorial, and I hope that it helps. If it doesn't, then maybe you can upload a better one, and if you do, please put it in the video response, because I'd much rather people be able to see a video that actually makes sense. But I think this one made enough sense that you can kind of figure out what I mean. Anyway, thanks for watching. You guys have a great week, and